The talk that I'm doing today will last approximately 55 minutes, and it's entitled The Primordial Teachings. Now, the title is a little bit daunting because when you think of the word primordial, you think of dinosaurs and ancient teachings, and you think of the energy related to ancient times and in the past. In Buddhism, primordial refers to the part of ourselves that existed before we had a soul. And the highest form of enlightenment refers to the part of us that returns to that original primordial being that we all have, that we all possess. This primordial aspect of ourselves fires our spiritual growth. It fires our spiritual search and our path. Each one of us that are here is being propelled by something we don't understand. We know, for instance, that we are derived from stars. We know that. We know that everybody here used to live in a higher, more exalted state of being. But at some point, we fell from that consciousness. And so now we're all scrambling to get ourselves back, to understand what it takes to overcome the realm of karma, the realm of suffering, the realm of being in this world, living and dying, and then forgetting it all and doing it all over again. I, for one, don't want to do that again in this lifetime or any other lifetime. So this talk, actually this introduction to a series of talks, is a course that I teach called the Primordial Teachings. Primordial Teachings came into this world from ancient cultures, primarily Taoism and Buddhism. They emerge as some of the most sacred teachings that you can get, and they are primarily from the mouth of a master to the ear of a student. But we live in a very perilous time. This is one of the times when the earth can end. In mankind's history, we've never lived in a time where we can be the last species on the planet. There are a number of theories as to what might happen. There are a number of ideas to help us try to understand what might happen. But this is one of those times when the higher universe has said, we're going to reveal things to this species, to this part of mankind that we've never told them before. Because in these times, there are things that come into being that we've never had access to. The sacred worlds reveal themselves at times of serious change. This planet must either evolve or perish. And our sun, which is the source of all of our light, of all of our energy, of all of our life, it is so much an integral part of our being that if it were to go out 8 minutes from now, everybody in here would freeze. So, what are our primordial teachings? What does that refer to exactly? These are images that were taken from a spacecraft put up by the Japanese called the Yoko spacecraft, which orbits the sun at a 1 million mile orbit. I didn't know that either. We have spacecraft that actually orbit the sun. And what the spacecraft has been showing is that the sun is changing. If you look at the dark rightmost image, that's how the sun looked in 1991. In 1995, the sun had changed tremendously. This is over just a 4-year period, and these images were taken 4 months apart. It shows that the sun's output of X-rays and UV rays has increased by a factor of 20. Scientists don't really have a good explanation for that. We also recognize that sunspots have increased many-fold over any other time period in history that we've ever measured. We've also measured a tremendous increase in the magnetic field of the sun. For one thing, we don't know why the sun has a magnetic field. A lot of stars don't have a magnetic field, but our sun does. Our sun's energy at this point is at a 1,000-year peak. And in the last 60 years, it's putting out more energy than in the previous almost 1,100 years. Now, what does that mean for us? What does that fact, that scientific fact, what does it have to do for us here on the earth? For one thing, scientists are now believing that our global warming is in part related to the increase in solar energy. We've noticed that not only has the sun increased in temperature, So is Mars. So is Pluto. So is Jupiter. And many of the planets in the solar system are now much warmer. Mars has almost lost its polar ice caps in the same way that our ice caps are being attenuated. We can't really say that Martians are driving Chevys and Fords and causing that ice cap to leave, at least not that I know of. So we can say that there's really no man-made contribution to Mars losing their polar caps. Unless somebody has some data that I know, this would be the place to ask that question. Scientists at Duke reported just a few years ago that at least 10 to 30% of our global warming is related to what's going on with the sun, and that the direct contribution of the sun's rays and the increase in that energy is causing our planet to change. Also, some researchers at Columbia University have corroborated that. One thing that's happening that most people don't know about, and that's happening in this world that our wonderful media don't report to us, is we're in the middle of the biggest mass extinction in 65 million years. Now, the definition of a mass extinction says that 50% of a species that inhabit a planet have to die. So to put it simply, half of all the species on this planet have died in the last 50 years. There are about 10 million species on Earth, and we're losing about 50 species a day. Now, fortunately, most of these are plants and bacteria. Unfortunately, we need plants and bacteria to live. Some of the most famous species are bees. Half of all the bees are gone. Frogs. Half of all the frogs are gone. I could go on for a day just with that. But evolutionarily, this has never happened, at least that we can tell. We have never seen a time when our species has been part of a mass extinction of such a very fast archaeological frequency. If you look at this graph, you can see that sunspot activity, actually I borrowed this from Al Gore. This was one of his great graphs from that talk that he did that he got the Nobel Prize for, I believe. You can see that over the last 150 years or thereabouts, sunspot activity has gone up tremendously. At this time, we have more sunspots being recorded than at any other time in history. And this is from the Antarctic readings and from Greenland. Our best scientific recordings are rendered from those two observation stations. Our global temperatures mirror sunspot activity. Global temperatures have gone up over the average of the last 100 years or so by almost a full 1 to 2 degrees. Scientists say that if our global temperature goes up 6 degrees, mankind and all the species here run the risk of extinction. Now, when you look at the increase in the solar energy, there's something that you see that affects us directly. Skin cancer from 1973 to the year 2000 has gone up more than threefold all over the world. These are numbers that the World Health Organization doesn't report to the masses. They don't let us know this sort of thing. What I'm pointing to is not a lecture on the climate and the sun. It's a discussion of energy that is affecting us and is mutating not only the planet, but our species. One of the mutations that's occurring right now is autism. Autism is more common than diabetes in children, more common than childhood cancer, more common than any other disease in children that has ever been medically recorded. We don't really know what causes autism. We do know that we can't treat it. We also understand that autism is a mutation in our species. Autistic children don't think the way a child that doesn't have autism thinks. They don't respond emotionally in the same way. Their brain functions, when you measure them, are quite different. But if the rate of autistic births continue, a large number of the people that we know that are having children now will have autistic relatives. Autistic children, if it's a severe disease, they can't work. They can't hold jobs. Relationships are difficult for them. So this is a dangerous mutation that we have to understand better in this world, because that's our future. One that's probably even more dangerous is malignant melanoma. Malignant melanoma is almost 20 times more common now than it was in the year 1935. That means that when sunlight strikes our bodies don't know what to do with that. It's energy that's affecting us, that's mutating us, that the ancient teachings say if we learn to use solar energy, it doesn't have to be a mutation. It doesn't have to be something that causes our race to go extinct. Within solar energy is the secret to our evolution. Within the power of the sun is an energy that can allow us, if we take advantage of it, to grow beyond what it means simply to be human. Another thing that's happening with the human race is that we have learned more in the last 50 years than in all of recorded history. Human knowledge doubles roughly every 10 years. That has never been true before. So even though we are, as a race, evolving and becoming mutated by certain forces, we are also changing in a way that we have never experienced before. If you're my age, I'm around 50, and you look at the computer gadgets we have now versus what we had when I was a kid, some of these things are hard to understand. If you take an iPod, for instance, it has more data on that little device than anything we had in the 1960s and 70s. All of the recorded knowledge of man's history can be held in a few terabytes of a machine that will fit in the palm of your hand. That's not something we could ever do before. Clearly, there's something happening to us that changes what it means to be human. And many scientists and myself believe that it's coming from the sun, and that if we can learn to adapt and use that energy, we can evolve. The course that I teach, called the Primordial Healing Course, teaches us how to take in energy from the sun and metabolize it and use it in order to help your mind and your body and your soul grow. Now, you might say, we already use sunlight. Yes, we do. We already metabolize sunlight to make vitamin D. Without vitamin D, life would be very difficult for us here on the planet Earth. Vitamin D is the result of the action of sunlight on melatonin in your skin and other chemicals, and also serotonin. But there are other things that sunlight can do to your body to change you, to help you evolve. We call these primordial forces that emanate from the sun, and they will help protect us against the negative energies that are coming from the sun and help us take in the positive energies. Now, oddly enough, there were several ancient cultures that knew how to do this. The Mayans, the Egyptians, the Aztecs, just to name a few, had a very complex system of interacting with the sun through mirrors and through certain sacred substances that allowed them to do things and create a civilization that we have not matched. We can't build the Great Pyramid. We can go look at it and say that's wonderful, but we can't move those stones. We don't really fully understand how they did it. That's why we haven't created one just like it. There's something about their culture that makes them different, that makes them unique. Modern Egyptians can't build a pyramid. There was something about ancient Egyptian, ancient Mayans, that gave them a highly advanced civilization that disappeared almost overnight. The basics of primordial healing involves learning to understand the spiritual primordial nature of this radiation that's coming to us and affecting us whether we want it to or not. We have to learn to safely interact with it, to ingest it. We also have to learn how to use it and transmit the energy back into the environment to help heal the environment. And then we have to understand what these forces are before using them makes any sense. The idea of using primordial forces doesn't work if the forces are unknown to you, if you're afraid of them, if there's something that feel like, I can't do that. This is not something that I want to take advantage of. Let's talk about what primordial energy is at its most basic form. At this moment, there are particles bathing every square inch of this room. In the early 1900s, scientists did experiments at different altitudes in the atmosphere and also at different parts of the world, and they noticed that there was radiation that was contaminating the experiments. They would shield the experiments in lead cages and boxes, and the radiation still got through. We didn't know where it came from back then. There was a scientist, though, that did some research and discovered that there are particles that emanate all around us that we don't really know where they come from. Every minute of every day, there are tens of thousands of these particles that bathe the body. Ancient Taoist texts taught that the earth is constantly bathed in primordial energy, and that as we enlighten, as we evolve, humans will become more evolved by using this energy. This is in the Tao, this is in many ancient texts. This happened thousands of years before Victor Hess discovered primordial energy. The Tao taught that this energy contains the blueprint for all life and activity in our universe. It also taught that this energy emanates constantly from the Creator and can be used by everybody. Modern man has only recently discovered this. Victor Hess was a scientist in 1912 who did the basic work on discovering primordial energy, something that ancients had talked about for thousands of years. He was awarded the 1936 Nobel Prize for his discovery. He discovered that if you went up in the atmosphere in a balloon, the radiation that contaminated experiments got worse. This energy or this information about the radiation led to X-rays, MRIs, to the computer, to many things that we now take for granted, the television, many other things. Science teaches us that these high-energy particles originate from outer space and that they travel at nearly the speed of light. And that these particles, oddly enough, are all of the elements that make up our planet. So that at every minute of every day, of every week, of every year, gold particles are striking your body. The human body contains about $50 worth of gold because of this. Yeah. The human brain is contained of 5% rhodium and iridium. Rhodium and iridium are extremely valuable heavy earth elements. That much, the 5% capacity of the brain to contain those molecules makes your brain very valuable on the open market as a commodity, no matter how much education you have. 10,000 of these particles on the average strike the human body each second. The energy of these particles is higher than anything we've ever measured. Now remember, energy equals information. The more information contained in a particle, the more energy that particle has. The reality is these particles have energy of such a high degree that we can't recreate it in a laboratory. Something is happening in nature that's bombarding us with energy that we can use, that we can learn to use. We just have to trap it in the body to learn how to do that. These particles carry more information every second than any of us could ever digest in a lifetime. When the Buddha was working on his enlightenment, he spent 5 years under a tree looking at the sun. Many of the ancient masters in ancient times would spend years just looking at the sun. Quetzalcoatl, who was known as the ancient Mesoamerican god of the sun, was said to have originated from the sun itself. Ra, who was one of the most powerful gods in the Egyptian mythology program, emanated from the sun himself. Apollo, who was the god of enlightenment in Greco-Roman times, emanated from the sun. There is an association with higher intelligence and particles that emanate from our sun. In ancient times, many peoples have personified these particles as intelligences or beings. Some scientists have noticed that over time, the amount of primordial energy that strikes the earth is not constant. Over the last 250,000 years, there have been great fluctuations in the amount of this energy that strikes our planet. Oddly enough, each time that energy fluctuates upward, it changes and mutates our race. So that at one point, we have a very small skull case like Australopithecus, the smallest skull you see there. Then there was a blip, or an increase in primordial radiation hitting the planet. We can tell that from the sediment layers and measuring how much energy is in those layers. We then look at Cro-Magnon man, or Neanderthal, another blip in this energy. Man changes again. Homo sapien, which is the species that we are, is experiencing another blip in this energy, and guess what? The average size of the human skull is increasing. Our brain capacity is increasing. We're becoming smarter. We're becoming more evolved, more advanced. Now that goes two ways, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Everywhere you look in the sky, you find this energy that's mutating and evolving us. It seems to come from everywhere, from stars, from gas clouds, from the sun, from everywhere. No matter where you look, you find it. The question that we have for this conference is, what is the hidden spiritual nature of these particles? We know what physics says about them, but we're only partially interested in physics in the International Science and Consciousness Conference. We want to understand how consciousness and physics are related. How can these energies help us evolve? How can they change the mind, the body, and the soul so that when you leave here, you have something you can hold on to, that you can put your finger on and say, I can use that. What is the information? If they have so much information, exactly what is it? What are the spiritual elements that bombard our planet with this radiation? How do these particles carry this information? And how does it affect our climate? A giant star explodes in a supernova emitting cosmic rays. The cosmic rays enter the Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere is then seeded with free electrons that are released by these rays. This causes the nucleus for cloud formation. The more of these rays that strike our atmosphere, the more clouds we get. This is from a model from physics based on a Danish National Space Center computer graphic. It says that as these particles strike our atmosphere, they are at least in part responsible for what's going on with our planet. Not only with the physical planet, but also with the climate changes around the planet. So our perceptions about space, our relationship to it, and our cellular structure have to evolve and change. These changes can be positive or they can be negative. These energies that strike us can be positive or negative. And the effects that are generated by these energies can have a negative effect on the body or a positive effect. The spiritual understanding of what these particles are is quite different than the physical understanding. So let's go over that. There are 6 main types of these particles. Ancient teachings from the Tao explain that if you understand what these energies are, you can use them. Everything that we have in our life, everything that we have in our world, everything we think about, everything that we use, comes from this earth. But there are energies that affect us that do not come from this earth. The first type is called the particles of blessing. These particles carry energy that can positively affect your life. Beings that are moving toward enlightenment, understanding the physics of these particles, can conduct miracles with them. They can conduct spontaneous healings with animals and people. They can create things out of nothing. You've heard stories about masters that will materialize and then create a banquet out of nothing. Understanding these particles allows you to use your consciousness and the energy within your soul to manipulate matter. Now you might say that sounds impossible. Your body does it every day. If you get a cut, your body uses the energy from the universe to heal that cut. You don't have to say, body, heal this cut on my hand. Your body does it for you. If you eat an apple, your stomach will take that apple, digest it, break it down into all the sugars and proteins that you need to live without you having to understand what it's doing. Your body is getting instructions from somewhere to help you understand that. Ancient spiritual teachers say that it comes from the particles of blessing. Some people are more susceptible to receiving the blessing particles, and some people are more susceptible to receiving the particles of chaos, which is the next category. The chaos particles cause car accidents. They cause illness, disease, mental illness, emotional problems, cancer. Energetic factors, and we're going to have slides on each one of these. Energetic factors help mankind evolve at a level that allows them to understand the universe in a totally different manner. The Enlightenment Factors are energies that cause us to seek God. We've recently discovered a gene associated with these factors. Each one of us has a gene inside of us, and it's kind of cutely named the God gene, that says that each of us has a tendency to seek or not to seek God, or some understanding of what the Creator is. Information factors essentially are the factors of particles that hold consciousness, what it means to understand the universe around us, where calculus came from, where Ben and Jerry's ice cream came from, that sort of thing. The particles that change us, the particles of blessing, interact with our internal organ systems and allow us to have access to information that the universe can help us use to evolve and expand our consciousness and to make changes in our lives. Some people are extraordinarily susceptible to positive particles. These people we look at as a little weird, a little different. They're not like, the average person. They don't think like we do, which is a good thing, probably. For instance, Albert Einstein, up on the top left, is one of the greatest scientists ever to live. He wasn't a great student, but he was a great thinker. He understood that information in his thoughts was not created by him. He would sit for sometimes weeks or months at a time and think about one equation, and he would wait for the universe to reveal the answer to him. He saw black holes in his head. He saw light slowing down under certain circumstances and wrote it down as equations. He saw that in his head. Nikola Tesla at the bottom was another visionary that saw that energy could be created in such a way that it could be sent wirelessly all over the entire planet. He saw that in his head. Now, if we chose to as a race, we could do that right now. There are certain business conglomerates that are preventing that from happening. But there are certain people who continue to have his vision that don't think like the average person, that don't think about the negative universe in the same way they do the positive universe. Does anybody know the scientist on the top right? Sir Isaac Newton, that's right. Also a great Kabbalist and a very good chess player. Sir Isaac Newton had the understanding, he and Sir Leibniz, of what calculations and equations were required to understand the physics of movement. He helped create calculus. He helped create a science that all of us kind of worry about and fuss over in college and undergrad and high school. Does anybody know the scientist on the bottom? Say again? Yes. This man was one of the first people, even though ancient peoples had been saying it for a long time, that the earth and the sun had a very unique relationship. He couldn't say it in public. He was placed under house arrest for just thinking it. The Catholic Church recently apologized for saying that the earth and the sun had a unique relationship that didn't involve the earth being the center of the universe. But he was one of the first people to say that and write it down. He was many centuries ahead of his time because of that. Now, holy men and shamans and priests have said for centuries that the universe can instruct all of us. if we know how to listen, if we sit and learn to meditate and use the energy that's coming into the universe as we would a cup of water or as we would the rain. That each of us has the capacity to understand these words, these mantras, these healing sounds. And these sounds have been given to us from many different cultures. One of the reasons I quit doing traditional medicine and stopped doing research and stopped being a professor is I saw some miracles with these products, with these words. The first miracle I saw involved someone who had cancer. And saying a few words over the cancer made the cancer stop being cancer. It went away. The next thing that I saw was that a number of people who had emotional illnesses stopped having emotional illnesses when they started practicing healing words or mantras or using certain specific sounds. Those sounds changed my paradigm of understanding of what it meant to give a person a pill. It had always bothered me when I read medical papers that 40 to 50% of the time, if you gave somebody a sugar pill, it did as well as any medicine you could write. That bothered me. I thought, okay, if I give this person a prescription for diazepam, for instance, 40% of the time they're going to get well just because I tell them to. Just because I say in this bottle is a pill that's going to help you get better. Something inside of our being takes advantage of sound and transforms sound into action. Drug companies don't want you to use that. They don't want you to understand that you can use a sound from a CD, that you can use a sound that you can say to yourself. You can use a sound that is available freely in nature on the internet to get rid of a disease, because they don't make a profit on that. The effect of these particles on consciousness changes the world. Beings like the Buddha understood this. He created many meditations over time that allowed the world around us to be incredibly different. He was one of many teachers that understood that you could use these particles for evolution. There are also particles that cause chaos. Everybody knows who this man is. Jesus. Not quite. This is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler had an extraordinarily charismatic field. He would speak for hours to audiences of hundreds of thousands of people, getting them all fired up about killing. He would speak for hours about very obscure topics, and he would often add music from Wagner and other great German composers to add power to his speeches. But one of the energies that he had caused people to follow him without question. As a result, millions of people on this world were slaughtered. He drove the world into one of the darkest times in history with his consciousness. He had some help, of course, but were it not for him, there might not have been a World War II. But his consciousness, in the same way that a Buddha consciousness, in the same way that a Jesus consciousness, changed our world. There was a mediation of something that caused his consciousness to change. As these particles, the negative particles of chaos, inspire people, they cause us to do things that when we look at them, we say, why? Where's this energy coming from? Why would we go into a country and kill 600,000 people for their products, for their oil? Why would we do that? Why would we go into a country, set up secret prisons, and enslave and kill and murder people because we think they might hurt us? That consciousness is under the influence of something negative. And that's what we have to do to evolve from this direction that many of us are going toward. Because for the first time in history, we have the capacity to destroy our own planet. Mankind has never been really able to do that. The positive particles are making us evolve in a good direction. The negative particles are saying, kill yourself. Suicide in the United States have gone up There's a 20-fold increase in suicide attempts in this country in the last 15 years, especially in young people and children. And oddly enough, the medicines that we try to give to treat those things make it worse. So if I give a child an antidepressant, there's a black box warning that comes with it that the body no longer responds to an antidepressant in children the way it did 20 years ago. It makes them want to kill themselves even more. So the mutation has already affected us in the way that medicines can't adapt to. There's something going on with us that we need to respond to. How do we attract the forces of good to our bodies? How can we diminish the negative effects from these forces? How can we increase the positive forces so that our species can evolve safely? There are a series of sounds that were discovered by a Nobel Prize-winning scientist, and his research was buried, so that most of us will never get a chance to hear about it. And these frequencies cause negative particles to be discharged from the body. I was able to capture some of his research and some of this sound and place it on a product that we call Conscious Mind Cleansing. It is one of the best treatments I've ever seen for anxiety and for depression. And having treated anxiety and depression for most of my adult life, I don't say that lightly. Because I notice that half the time when I give a person a pill, they don't respond to it. It's as though we are hardwired to need energy as much as we need matter. That something inside of us needs more than water. We need more than food. That we need energy. Our actions affect the universe around us. Our thoughts change the world around us. Physics teaches us that if you look at an experiment, you change the experiment. It also teaches us that if medicine teaches us that if a person is in a family and that person has depression, the other family members are going to be much more likely to get depressed, even if they have no family history and no genetic tendency toward depression. They just do. If a person in a family commits suicide, other people in the family are more likely to attempt the same. Our actions, both positive and negative, change the fabric of reality around us. If one person in a city wins the lottery, it makes it more likely that somebody nearby is going to win the lottery. There are clusters of cities in this country, usually small towns, where there have been 5 or 6 winners of the lottery. Now, this isn't usually a lot of money, like 150, 200,000, sometimes a couple million, but it's a significant amount to show that it's not just physical. There's a change in consciousness that causes us to change our environment depending on how we think and how we act. Now, the particles act on what we call gates. The Tao and a number of ancient Buddhist texts teach that there are a number of ways that we can open these gates. Now, interacting with these particles in these gates logically doesn't make a lot of sense. When we try to understand, well, how do you open a gate and how do you use it and how does crying open a certain gate? The Buddha said that the primordial knowledge and understanding of the universe is not comprehensible to the conscious mind. That the enlightened man is someone that the unenlightened man can only dream about. That the gates of blessing are something that are opened in 4 main ways. So let's talk about them briefly. The first is called the Gate of Tears. And this is also taught in the Kabbalah as well. In the Gate of Tears, there is a gate of energy that changes your magnetic field around you simply through crying. Let me give you an example. I had a client who had difficulty selling his house. In this economy, you could imagine, a lot of people have trouble selling this house, but he wanted to get married. And he wanted to move into a certain area, and he had to sell that house to get out of debt. And if he didn't sell the house, he was going to become bankrupt. The house had been on the market for 24 months, and he'd only had 3 people looking at the house. The house cost $1.8 million. So I asked him to use this technique of the Gate of Tears with some other techniques, but this was the main one. where he cried for someone that he did not know for 5 minutes a day. That house sold in 2 weeks. Now, logically, that doesn't make sense. What does a house selling have to do with you crying for somebody you don't know? The universe responds to us as though we were plugged into a matrix of consciousness. The universe doesn't care what we understand so much as what we do with our understanding. It wants us to look at reality as though we are part of it rather than something we have to analyze and pick apart. The Gate of Tears works by crying for someone you don't know for 5 minutes or more. There's an energy that rises up within your body that attracts to itself particles that can make blessings come into your life. After you've done the crying for a few minutes, then you make a prayer. The Gate of Light. The Gate of Light works by taking in sunlight or light from stars into your consciousness, into your brain. There's a way to do that. That's something that we teach in this course. By taking in sunlight, you can increase your IQ, you can slow down aging, you can increase the amount of information and the ability to calculate information that you have. You can also heal certain illnesses simply by taking in the right kind of sunlight. And I think some of you have heard me talk about ways of taking in sunlight, especially at sunrise and sunset. I will say that it is extremely advantageous to look at the sunrise. There's energies that come up when the sun is rising in the morning that are directly related to the Gate of Light. There are also similar energies that come up when the sun is setting that are related to the Gate of Light, that increase your ability to heal yourself, that increase your ability to heal others. There are certain prayers that you can say that open the energy of these particles so that you can process and transmit them more to others. And we'll go over what some of these prayers are, and it's also related in part to the Gate of Sound. The gates of chaos. Now, these are very important. The gates of chaos are opened through our consciousness. We attract negative energies to ourselves by our thoughts and by our actions. These negative energies are the particles that stream in from different parts of the universe and hit our bodies. Which ones we process, the blessing particles or the chaos particles, are determined in part by what you do in your daily life. Cursing, for instance, has a negative effect not only on your body but on your environment. Most of us have heard about the experiments from the 70s and 80s where you curse at plants or animals and it affects their growth. We also know that if you use cursing on a regular basis, if you use curse words, it affects your response to treatment of cancer. It affects, in many cases, how long you live. It affects how your consciousness works in response to many areas of your life. The gate of hate. Hatred is a very strong medicine, and I don't use that word lightly. Hating someone, hating yourself, hating God, is one of the most destructive things you can do to your body. There was a research study done on people who are optimistic in their outlook on life and people who are pessimistic and use negative words frequently. Scientists will study almost anything if you give them money for it. In this study, they found that if a person hated others, I think on an average of 3 or 4 individuals, and used curse words on a regular basis, if that person developed a cancer, they died 200% in a much shorter time period than a person who did not. They had an average of a 10-year decrease in their lifespan, just by using those words. That gate changes your life. It changes your ability to be able to extend your life. People who went to church, who meditated, who used positive affirmations, on the average live 12 years longer than people who do not. The research backs it up, and there's been a number of studies at Washington University, at Duke, and at Seattle that shows that your consciousness is affected by what you think and by what you do. And that effect in your consciousness extends to your life, to your ability to beat disease, to your ability to process energy. the gate of darkness. The gate of darkness relates to the energy that we use to hurt others directly and on purpose through dark forces. There are forces out there that I don't like to name that you can invoke to kill somebody from a distance. In my spiritual training, right after I finished my residency work, I worked with a man that called himself Gus. Gus was probably one of the most prolific and one of the most talented spiritual teachers I've ever met. He never told me his real name. Gus was 6'5" and he weighed 390 pounds. Huge man, and he always wore white. And his primary clients were the mafia. Gus could say words over a chicken, write a man's name, and tape it to the chicken, and that man would die in a week. I saw that. Gus taught me spiritual self-defense and the use of spiritual forces to protect myself and my family. But there are dark forces that you can use in the same vein to hurt others from a distance. The gate of anger. Anger is a disease. Anger causes the particles to strike your body in such a way that you can't use them positively. Anger makes your blood pressure go up. It makes your stomach act in funny ways. It causes strokes. We know that if a person has an anger episode, the heart goes into certain arrhythmias that we can measure just by a person getting angry. If a person stays angry, those arrhythmias can turn into heart attacks, etc. Speak for a moment just about energetic factors, because we have about 10 minutes left. Energetic factors are the energies that we understand as the electromagnetic spectrum. These energies also come into our planet through these factors, through these particles. We call it light. But remember, sunlight has a dual nature. It's part particle and part wave. When we look at light, what we're looking at is particles of energy. These particles allow for every function in the body, every function on this planet that we understand as life. Those emanate in part from those particles. The particles also regulate melatonin synthesis in the body. Melatonin is important because without that, you would not sleep properly. Your sleeping-waking cycle would be totally off. Without melatonin, you wouldn't know when day and night occurred, even if you could see the sun. Photosynthesis depends on these factors. We depend on photosynthesis. Without plants, there would be no life on this planet. There's also an energy that sustains life directly, and it's called the enetic energy. Now, what exactly is that? There are a number of individuals that can take the energy of these particles and use it directly. They don't need food. They don't need water. The most famous of these individuals have been called saints, but there are still people living among us today, and many animals that can do this, that can live without food for months, food or water. This is a lady that died in 1904, who was later made a saint, who for the last 13 years of her life did not eat and did not drink. And she did not lose weight. She was very healthy. I think she died of tuberculosis. Saint Alexandrina Maria da Costa. She was made a saint by Pope John Paul II. And she's one of the people that's been documented as being able to use the light of the sun to sustain herself. In history, there was a man by the name of St. Nicholas of Flue. In the year 1417, it was documented that St. Nicholas had lived most of his life just by taking one consecrated wafer per day. Now, if you've ever been to Mass and taken a wafer, you know there's not a lot of nutrition in a wafer. But that's what he lived on. He said that there was energy that emanated from the universe that he could concentrate in that wafer that gave him more than enough power to sustain himself. This is a man who lives now who also claims the same. There's a lot of controversy about Hiram. He is a friend of mine. We have email conversations from time to time, but he doesn't eat very much. And he's been studied at Jefferson and University of Pennsylvania, and he says that he also takes in energy from the sun and from the universe to sustain himself. There are pathways within the human body that allow us to take in this energy, not unlike plants. A bear, for instance, can sleep in a cave for 6 months and not drink and not eat and not die. A human cannot sleep for 6 months and not die, unless there's something that happens in the human being that enables him to turn sunlight into energy. There are certain of these factors, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow in the workshop that we have. There's a way to take in solar energy into the body. There's certain substances that you can take that trap sunlight energy in your body. These substances allow you to look at the sun and turn it into energy for the expansion of your consciousness. Since sunlight is a continuous force, if you use these substances properly, your body begins to expand and evolve. So I'm getting the sign that we have about 5 minutes left, and I promise I'd leave just a few minutes for questions. Or do you want me to keep going with the slides? Your choice. Okay. I was getting that vibe, so I just wanted to confirm that. Information factors. You're going to like these slides. There are energies that come from the sun that are transmitted directly to us through sunlight that carry information. Many of these have been recorded by ancient historians and ancient spiritual teachers. Has anybody seen either one of these? Like this one? Has anybody seen that before? Or this? Yeah, this part is, these are some of the names of God. But what are these? Or, what is that? I'll go back just for a moment. This is a graph of what primordial information looks like when you write down the energy from a specific particle. And the spiritual teachers that write down the energy forms say that the particles have a sound, they have a geometric shape, and when you listen to them properly, they sound like music. So they say that the universe sings its knowledge and consciousness to us. It brings reality into being through sound. So this is a musical scale. Each of these are notes of primordial information. You say them in the proper way, you sing them in the proper way, things happen around you. This is a map that was taken from an ancient Kabbalistic teacher that is very close to what we've seen in many Taoist and ancient Buddhist and Hindu scripts that gives an outline for the energy that comes from the sun. So it's a map of the energy that emanates from the sun, like a blueprint for that energy. Our consciousness is constantly bombarded with this energy, and these energies are vast in number. The information that comes from these energies can be used for spiritual growth. It's estimated that if we don't use this energy for growth, about 100,000 people a year die from cancer related just to cosmic radiation. We call it sunlight. But this information and this energy, if we don't learn to use it, it will either mutate us and cause us to perish, or cause us to evolve and grow beyond just the physical form. The question we're going to answer in our workshop tomorrow is, how do we safely ingest and metabolize cosmic radiation? More than just to make vitamin D in the body, more than just to translate melatonin into serotonin, et cetera. How can we use it to make some really cool molecules that make you smarter, that make you live longer, that make your consciousness grow and expand? And I'll stop with this little teaser. This is Sir Lawrence Gardner. He's probably one of the most famous historians in the world. He found that there is a history of using sunlight, taking it into the body, that extends to the Egyptians, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Hebrew, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, and a number of other evolutionary advanced races. Many of these races disappeared without a trace. His research and part of the work that he did is what we're going to talk about in our workshop about how you take primordial energy into the body and use it to help you evolve. Thank you so much. Let's take a few questions. If you could come up to the mic here. And if you have a question, give us your name, your credit card number, and room number before you...
You were fantastic.
Thank
Truly,
you.
really were.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy. My question is, you talked a little bit about the prayers. You didn't really expand upon that. Are there specific prayers that can be used to...
Yes, we're going to go over a number of them. One prayer is called the Usnisa Vijaya Dharani, which, let me just see here. Looks like that. Oh, it took the screen off. Looks like that. It is one of the most powerful prayers for transforming your consciousness and the world around you that I've ever seen. We offer this prayer as the prayer of greater miracles. My students in my course are required to memorize this and use it. It is a prayer given to us by a being called the Medicine Buddha, who is a real being in a real dimension, that once you learn to memorize the prayer, it helps you be protected from cancer, from disaster, from disease, from emotional and physical calamities of many different types, simply by memorizing it. The true beauty of the prayer, though, is that if you memorize it, it transforms the essence of your soul, so that when you die, your soul has the opportunity to be reborn in a higher world, because there are beings that look at the essence of your soul when you die, and they see what is the highest energy that your soul contains. Do you have something within your soul from a higher spiritual world? If you do, then you're offered incarnation in a higher world. If you don't, then you come back to this world. That's one of the main reasons we offer this prayer, because I'll give you a story. My mother died about a year ago. My mother took no prisoners in her life. She was the first person that I saw shoot another human being. I was 6. She shot him 3 times. I was concerned about my mother's soul when she passed. My mother was in a nursing home the last few months of her life, and my mother was a devout Christian. But I knew that from what I had seen in my visions, that if she died without some intervention, I was concerned about what might happen. So I said, "Mom, can I read this prayer to you?" And she said yes, and started crying. I was very surprised that she did that, because she usually called what I do voodoo and other not so flowery terms. My mother died on Mother's Day last year, and when we put her to rest, it was a very cloudy day, and it was raining outside, and a hole opened up in the sky over her grave, and a spiral of sunlight hit her grave for about 30 seconds and then spiraled back up into the sky. My son pointed that out to me first, and I didn't see it right away, but I believe that that was the Medicine Buddha passing a blessing to my mother through this prayer. So I think it's worth using. I've seen a number of other, not quite so dramatic, but a number of other instances where prayers like this work. That was a very good question, by the way.
My question, Mitchell, is you were talking about some of these radiations that were causing autism in children, and
Yes.
I heard that it can also be caused by vaccinations. I'd just like to get your comments on that.
I knew somebody was going to ask that. How many people here have been vaccinated? Just about all of us. How many people here have not been vaccinated, ever? What were you told about vaccinations, why you were given them? Anybody? To protect us from disease. And in particular, the disease of smallpox, which has been a scourge of mankind for many, many hundreds of years, if not longer. What we weren't told about vaccinations, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, but what the heck? What we weren't told about vaccinations is that they also change your chemistry and your energy, so that internally you become a different being once you're vaccinated than before you were vaccinated. In other words, it causes spontaneous mutations. And what is autism? It is a spontaneous mutation. That's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. I recognize your research, and I appreciate the information you're giving us.
Thank you.
Also, I want to express something that came up for me, which is you showed us a lot of pictures of men, Newton. I'm sure you know my question already.
Yes.
Yes, and not much mention of women. And so I was wondering...
Of which there are many.
Okay,
that
wonderful.
are very gifted.
So in this case, I would ask you if you would kindly give us some idea of the relationship, or is there a different relationship of women with these particles, or is it? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Probably the most gifted woman I ever met, a person who understood this primordial teaching, was a woman by the name of Indira Devi. She was the wife of the ambassador to England from India, an extraordinarily gifted woman. She was a woman that lived in an ashram the last probably 3 decades of her life. And as she lived there, she performed miracles almost daily. The first thing that I can really say that I saw that was a miracle, she performed. In the Kabbalah, they teach that women are more susceptible to taking in these particles and metabolizing them for spiritual development than men. We also recognize in physics and in medicine that women are more resistant to pain. They handle stress better. They also live longer for a number of reasons, and that spiritually, they tend to be more evolved than their mate. Now, there are a lot of reasons that we could say this. They read more, they have more of an interest. But in one of the ancient Taoist teachings, they taught that the energy of the universe that transforms reality, that evolves us, comes in through the body of the mother. And that the energy that causes enlightenment in a person, if they're going to be able to have that, is first embodied in the mother. Not too long ago, I saw an angel in a vision. And the angel taught me about making talismans that trap energy within a certain type of material, deerskin to be exact. Deerskin has a very unique property of being able to trap cosmic particles. It's considered to be a divine material. This angel said that unless you write the mother's name on the deerskin, it doesn't work. So that in the talisman, the energy of the mother is required for the talisman to confer a blessing onto the individual. So the mother is very important. Women are very important. They gave me the 0 sign, so we'll. Then we'll keep going. We'll keep going. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. It was great, wonderful.
Thank you.
I was wondering if a lot of these teachings that you were talking about, between the gateways to the particles, to the prayers, to energetics, of all of this around us, if there actually were predominant in human civilization before, and that's how we know about them now, and if they kind of like have lives of their own in our existence.
I believe that this knowledge has come to different aspects of humanity in the past. And I believe that it gets lost because people that use it and leave. And so there are records of what the information is, how the knowledge works, but the records are very scanty. And a lot of people that see the information, that hear about it, they will walk away from it. And so if enough people do that over a long enough period of time, knowledge gets lost. But I believe that there have been a number of races of humans that have used this information for their ultimate advantage, which means, in my opinion, ascension and translation, changing themselves into something more than just physical matter. One of my favorite science fiction shows, very good question, by the way, Stargate. Has anybody ever looked at Stargate? The stars of the show of Stargate are a race of beings who used to be human. They used information from the universe to change themselves into light. And I believe that each of us has that same kind of capacity if we simply use that information and energy properly. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest secrets about humanity that I think is kept from us is that each of us has the capacity to evolve beyond the physical form. There was a race of Gnostic visionaries called the Cathars. How many people have heard of the Cathars? Good. The Extinction and the Inquisition around the Cathars started the Great Inquisition. Now, a lot of people don't realize why the Catholic Church was so vehement about hunting the Cathars. The Cathars had a book called the Book of Marat, or some people call it the Book of Marie. And in that book was a series of musical notes that when a person learned the series of notes in a proper way, they could translate their body into light. They also taught that human beings had the capacity for evolution and enlightenment and advancement by using the sun, very much like the Essenes. Well, the Catholic Church thought that if they kept teaching this, they were going to become a threat to the established hierarchy of religious forces in the world at that time. So they were slaughtered by the millions. But before they were slaughtered, they passed on the book to certain ancient groups of adepts, one of which being the Templars. The Templars in their early teachings also taught that human beings were capable of evolving and translating into light. And guess who came under the church's radar shortly after that? Templars. The Book of Marie, or the Book of Mary, was considered by many to be the earliest form of what we call the Holy Grail. And it was actually a series of sounds that the Templars and the Cathars taught to their followers. You have any? Yes.
Thank you for that. And I would also like to add that the research now is saying that the connection in our synapses, in our brains, is not a chemical, electrical current. It's sound current.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You are welcome.
It's very encouraging. My background is French, European, and Native American, and I studied, before I became a psychotherapist, I studied medicine. To be a doctor, there's a lot of scientific training in me. And there was a period, many years, where I was involved in my mother's tradition, Northern Plains, Lakota, and Cheyenne tradition. And studying with her and other medicine men and medicine women and my aunts and grandparents, for many years I was involved in what we called the traditional Lakota and Cheyenne sun dance, where it's a very intense dance, and it's been open up to women. And in a nutshell, we establish a personal and intimate and committed relationship with the sun.
And took in energy from it.
which it's a little bit more than a metaphor. We feel that the sun is like the soul, of the Great Spirit. And in the prayers, one who establishes a personal, intimate, committed relationship, just like with a spousal relationship for life, we have special prayers and a special term that only sun dancers are qualified to call the sun, Nisehaman, which means our sun. And I tell you truly, I've witnessed this, that we've been out for days, from 1 to 2 to 4 days, almost completely naked, just with a loincloth in the sun, and our skin will get just burned to a certain point, and then it stops. And I mean, I've experienced this myself and witnessed it. And also, in the years since I've been doing the sun dance, I've seen the difference when I'm doing certain things, meditating and doing certain things in and out of the sun. So I want to thank you very much. This is the first time ever I've seen an acknowledgement of these things in a presentation.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, and God bless you.
It's my pleasure. Just as a footnote to his information about the sun dance was one of the first Native American traditions that was targeted by the U.S. government. They targeted in such a way that it became illegal to perform that dance. And after many years, people that were found performing it were doing it at their own peril. It's done so now, but for many years it was done with only with a great deal of danger to the practitioners, because the government recognized there was something different about the dancers. There was some energy they were taking in that they just didn't want to deal with, so they would slaughter them. So it was a very powerful thing to do, very powerful. There was another group in Africa, I think it was related to the Yoruba tradition, where the doctor, the person who was considered to be the holy man in the tribe, would take young men out into the desert, and he would teach them how to take in sunlight through their eyes. And with the sunlight, he would teach them certain songs and certain prayers in the same way that the ancient Native Americans did, and it would make them in what he called suitable to be holy. So that there's an ancient tradition in many cultures of having a relationship with the sun that can make you stronger and more evolved. Now, in our Western culture, we've been misled about sunlight. We've been taught that sunlight is entirely dangerous, that you can't look at it, that you can't interacting with it, that the energy from the sun is something that only has negative power, negative energy in it. And that's not true. But that's what we're taught. That's not the truth. And one of the things I want to do with these teachings is just start to talk about what solar energy is and how it can help benefit us, and bring some of that teaching away from the underground and into the light, so to speak. Pun intended. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you very much.